Hey guys, this is a lecture over meiosis and sexual life cycles. We're going to be looking at a couple review type terms, and then we're going to today on this part be focusing on the actual different life cycles that you encounter in nature. The first thing that we've got to identify though is heredity, because if we're talking about life cycles, we're talking about from parent to offspring generations. This is leading into discussions about genetics. So here we see that, that heredity is the passing of traits from parent to offspring. And there's a couple of questions that would be brought up there. Would be things like, well, what are traits? And I've identified that down here, that traits are actually proteins. And that's the expression of all the things that make you who you are. The color of your hair, the color of your eyes, the shade of your skin, the fact that you're male or female. Those are all protein expressions. And we call those traits. When we're looking at how a trait or a protein is made, that goes back to a gene. And a gene is a segment of DNA that codes for a particular trait or protein. Sometimes it may be several proteins working together to express that trait. Other times it may just be one protein that expresses a particular trait. Things like, can you flip your tongue over? Can you roll your tongue? Do you have a widow's peak hairline? All of that comes from proteins that are coded by DNA. When we're looking at all of this, we're looking at actually at genetics. This is a genetics unit, and it's the study of heredity. That sperm and egg coming together to make the individual, who you are, is all determined and based on the DNA, and that DNA is all based on what your parents passed on to you. Next we'll be looking at a little chromosome review here. So we've got that a chromosome is made up of DNA, and it's actually wound around these proteins. So when we talk about a chromosome, we're talking about what maybe you think of as that X-type shape. And it's all of our DNA that's spread out, that's huge. It takes up your whole nucleus, and unless it's condensed down into a chromosome. And at that point, that DNA starts wrapping around these special proteins, and it condenses down into these shapes that you can see under a microscope when stained at particular times of cell division. Humans have 23 pairs of chromosomes, or 46 total. We get 23 of them from mom. We have 23 of them from dad. When we talk about the chromosomes, there's two types of chromosomes. There's autosomes, which would be numbers 1 through 22. And then there's the sex chromosomes, which for females, that would be XX. For males, that would be XY. And those are in every cell in your body. Now, some cells are very specialized in your body, like muscle, bone, skin, hair. There's all kinds of things that we could put there that are very specialized cells that exist in your body. There are two specific ones that go along with what we're talking about here, and they're called sex cells. And those sex cells for the females are eggs, for the males are sperm. And in humans, those cells are haploid. And we designate that with just an N designation. 23 chromosomes in the egg, 23 chromosomes in the sperm, and when they come together during fertilization, you get the 23 pairs, or 46 total. All other cells in the human body that have a nucleus and that have DNA are diploid, or 2N, with N being the number of chromosomes that that particular species has. So when we look at the actual life cycles that exist, and we talk about life cycles, we're talking about from adult to offspring and back from that offspring to an adult. So we're really talking about generations of organisms. The first that we're going to look at is the diploid generation. This is the type of life cycles that humans and animals have. We have adults that have a 2N designation, or that are diploid. Those adults will have cells that will undergo meiosis, which we're going to focus on in the next lecture. Meiosis is going to reduce the number of chromosomes by half to produce gametes that are haploid. Two of these gametes will come together, one from this adult, one from another adult, during fertilization, which is the uniting of that sperm and egg cell, to produce that adult cell again. Now, it'll first produce a zygote, but from the zygote on, that's a diploid cell. So I've left that out here. That zygote would appear, somewhere in here. and then the development all the way up until a mature adult. In humans, this meiosis, producing that sperm and egg, occur in the sex cells. So for males, that would be in the testicles. For females, that would be in the ovaries. And that's where this meiosis would occur. And of course, fertilization takes place usually in the fallopian tubes of the female. Next, we have the haploid life cycle. This is the life cycle shared by fungi and many protists. And it's called a haploid life cycle because the adults are haploid. And actually, with some of these, they can do asexual reproduction. In other words, they can just, in essence, make clones of themselves. But we're going to focus on the process of actually sexual reproduction in this lecture. So you have adults that will make gamete cells through just mitosis. It doesn't reduce the number of chromosomes because these are already haploid or in cells. So two of those gamete cells will come together during fertilization still to produce a diploid zygote, a zygote that has two sets of chromosomes. Those cells will immediately undergo meiosis to produce cells that are haploid, and those will be the adult individuals. And like I said, we see this with fungi and protists primarily. Finally, we have the alternation of generations life cycle. And this life cycle is the life cycle that we see in plants. So alternation of generations means that it has two functioning different generations that occur in the life cycle of one individual. We're going to start up here with we'll start down here at the bottom with sporophyte because that's the one that you're going to recognize the most. This primarily occurs in plants. The sporophyte is a diploid cell, meaning it has two sets of chromosomes. That sporophyte is actually the plant that most of the time you see. The tree growing out in your yard, grass on the ground, the flower or bush or whatever, those are primarily the sporophyte generation, and those are diploid. That sporophyte is going to undergo meiosis, and it's going to produce spores. Now, spores are haploid, and you see that here with the designation of the N. So they only have one copy of the chromosomes. Those spores will develop into the gametophyte. Now, with most flowering plants, the gametophytes are the embryo sac that's down inside the ovary or the pollen grain that floats around in the air or is carried on pollinators like animals or insects or birds, whatever may be the case there. Those gametophytes are haploid cells. The gametophyte will then produce gametes, and those gametes are also haploid. So really from spore to gametes, it's mitosis that's making each of those cells along the way. Those gametes, you'll have a sperm cell and an egg cell that will come together in fertilization to produce that sporophyte plant. Now, in plants, most of the time that sporophyte comes together and produces that seed, and then that seed will be released and eventually germinate and start growing that plant. But that is all the sporophyte generation.